Hi, welcome to Never Forever. This is a 3-part video series of our June 2018 trip to the Broughtons. As always, we flew from Vancouver into Nanaimo via seaplane, crossing the Strait of Georgia, and landing just a couple hundred meters from our boat. It was lovely to see it again. And we spent the first day loading all of our stuff out of storage back onto the boat and settling in. Then we took off out of the harbor and headed for Lesquetty Island. We had a beautiful sail racing alongside another boat for the first little while before he peeled off and we headed onto the islands. We took a look at Deep Bay, but it was full and decided we would settle into Scary Bay just off of Lesquetty Island. It was a little tight, there was a fish farm surrounding us, but it was a lovely anchorage. The next morning it was a cold and blustery day, but we were up bright and early and headed north for Campbell River. As we cruised up between Lesquetty and Texada Island, the winds were still pretty good. But as soon as we cleared the top of Lesquetty, they started to build. Pretty soon we were sailing downwind in about 20 to 25 knots of wind, and it made for a lovely rolly sail. It was a long day and eventually we got a little tired of rolling back and forth. All in all, it was pretty good until we hit Discovery Passage and then had a little trouble with furling in the mainsail. But eventually, back and forth, we got it all done and looked for a place to spend the night. We decided on Gowland Harbor. It was pretty open to the north, but because the winds were coming from the south, we had a pretty calm night. The next day, we head off for Seymour Narrows. We arrived a little bit early and cruised around for a bit. But pretty soon all the boats were going through, and we tucked in behind a couple to have a lovely transit. Seymour Narrows has been the site of a lot of wrecks over the years. But for us it was pretty calm. It was a short day, and we found ourselves in Blind Channel that night and settled in. We woke up to a beautiful, calm day. We took a little walk around the resort and then set off. First thing was to head up through Greenpoint Rapids. There was no wind, so we motored almost the entire day. Then it was through whirlpool rapids. We were the slow boat, so we were passed by a couple of other boats. And then out into Johnstone Strait, passing Port Neville. And again, the weather was pretty good. The winds weren't too high. It was just a little misty. We pulled into Port Harvey, said hi to George. Discovered this lovely Hunter 380 that was just across from us. One of the more interesting things happened was we saw this pair of bald eagles hassling a Canada goose. I told Leslie there was no way they were ever going to catch this thing, but eventually one of them succeeded and then towed it into shore. Port Harvey is a lovely place. I'm always glad to stop there. They successfully rebuilt after having the barge sunk, so now the restaurant is open. George is just working on the store. The next morning, everybody was pretty much gone by the time we got up, so we untied the lines, cast off, and headed for the Broughtons proper. The weather was on and off all day. As you can see, we started off with a beautiful sunny day, and the rain came a little later. But it never rained steady, and the sun was always peeking out. Johnstone Strait wasn't quite as calm as it was the day before. But really, there were no problems. And Leslie and I enjoyed the rock of the boat. Just as we turned into Blackfish Sound, we were greeted with a couple of spouts. It took me a few minutes to try and catch them, but eventually I caught our first humpback whale of the trip. Then as we crossed into Blackney Passage, we saw our first Dall's porpoises ever. Back into the archipelago. The sun peeked out a little bit, and we were greeted by a few Pacific whiteside dolphins. We settled into the anchorage off of Mound Island and decided we would spend a few days. First things first, relax. And then I decided I would make a little bit of bread for tomorrow. I make a no-knead recipe that I love, and it's simple as just mixing a few ingredients up, letting it spend. It rained that night, and then we fell asleep to the softly falling rain. The next morning was a down day, and of course we always have good luck, so it was a beautiful sunny day. We took off in the dinghy and decided we would go for a little trip. We had been joined in the anchorage by a big super yacht, but we didn't mind, we liked to share. First things first was a circumnavigation of Mound Island, through a little bit of Narrows, past this lovely midden beach. I decided to whip out the underwater casing for my GoPro knockoff and take a few shots. Nothing too interesting, but we had a good time. You can see years and years and years of shells from the midden beaches nearby. Then we decided it was time to explore Mound Island itself. It's been inhabited by the Aboriginal population for thousands of years. It's always beautiful to explore the BC rainforest. Nothing at all like what we find in Alberta. At one point we found ourselves under observation by this tiny little red deer. Spent a few minutes watching him, and he decided we were boring and wandered off into one of the trees. I also tried out my slow motion feature on my camera for the first time. Didn't turn out that well. And then it was back to the boat to relax and enjoy our first day in the Broughtons. Rained again in the evening after we were all settled in. The next morning we woke up to another sunny day and decided we would start moving towards Port McNeill. I was due to pick my brother up at the airport there, so we wanted to make sure that we were within striking distance. We settled into Spout Bay on Hanson Island and had the place all to ourselves. It's a little open to the east, but both the weather and the forecast are good. I fired up the barbecue, and we got ready to have a lovely evening. And off in the distance, I noticed this huge cruise ship cruising by. Oh, there's a cruise ship going by. They were just on their way back from Alaska, heading towards Vancouver or Victoria. And that ended our first week aboard. Stay tuned for the next 2 episodes.